Hi, I'm Kenny, and this is Not So Super Movie Reviews. Today we're talking about X-Men Origins, the Wolverine. Alright, so on this channel we only review superhero movies, or movies that originated from comic books, that have a Rotten Tomatoes score of 50% or less. X-Men Origins Wolverine comes at an astounding 37% critic score and 58% user score. Alright, so first thing, if you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all. Now, we're not going to apply that rule to my channel, since the whole point of this channel is to say something not nice about some terrible movies. However, I do want to try to, for every movie I review, put some spotlights on what did work. So, for this movie, let's talk about what worked. So, first thing is Hugh Jackman. I mean, he is Wolverine. For several generations of moviegoers and even comic book readers, Hugh Jackman embodies the character. And that is definitely true for me as well. Hugh Jackman nailed the role. He brought Wolverine to the front. I think the original story of the first X-Men movie used Wolverine as a focal point, but Hugh Jackman is what made that idea stick. And even though this is a terrible movie, Hugh Jackman is still Wolverine. And, you know, the fact that you can make a movie so bad and still bring him back in Days of Future Past with no problems at all tells you just how much he nailed this character. And the fact that he got another solo movie just with him in it is evidence enough that Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Let's also talk about Liev Schreiber. Like, if they had gotten him as Sabertooth from the beginning, which we'll talk about my issues with Sabertooth, no problems at all. He was a great Sabertooth. I mean, super menacing. Sabertooth's kind of a lesser known character, so he definitely elevated that character beyond what, I don't remember his name right now, but the guy who played it in X-Men. Alright, now the next thing that worked, the second thing that worked, is Deadpool. Finally, an on-screen adaptation of everyone's favorite Mark with a Mouth. I mean, Ryan Reynolds nails the role. I mean, the beginning where he's doing the swords and he cuts a bullet in half, and that two halves of the bullets kill these dudes, and then that twist at the end where he's like this seriously messed up dude who's got all these powers. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, it couldn't have been farther from the comic book character. It's almost like you wanted to offend them. And Ryan Reynolds spent, the next 7 years trying to apologize for that role. And he did. God bless him. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's going to about wrap up what worked about this movie. It's just hard to find nice things to say. If you watch my Dark Phoenix review, I try to be fair. I definitely try to stay off the bandwagon, but sometimes the bandwagon has a point. And X-Men Origins Wolverine makes that point pretty good, that this movie just is a wreck. So let's get into what didn't work. Alright, so the first thing that didn't work about this movie, and you've heard it said, if you watch any videos about this movie, this is one of the things that has to come up, and that is the special effects. They didn't even try. If you're talking about a movie about Wolverine, and you've never seen this movie, and I go up to you on the street, and I say, hey, what's the most important thing to get right about Wolverine? You're going to say, how about those metal claws that cuts everything up? How about that? The special effects team for this movie said, we're going to do that the worst. That was the last thing they did, and they had been treating the graphics department like crap, and so they were just like, you know what will really get them? If we make these claws look like garbage. And they really do. The first scene where we see the metal claws, they're so blatantly terrible that it boggles the mind. The whole scene is focusing on them. It's like your eye is clearly drawn to it, your attention is drawn to it, and they're terrible. Special effects across the board are not great. Namely, the explosions are noticeably fake. They tried to make Professor Xavier at the end, this little twist ending where he shows up to save the kids that Wolverine couldn't be bothered to save initially. We'll get there. They try to make him look younger. Doesn't work. Alright, the second thing, and this is definitely a holdover from my issues with Dark Phoenix. So, you're repeating the sins of the past, I guess, is continuity issues. This movie goes out of its way to just crap on the original X-Men movies. And the original X-Men movies were, not that far removed. Dark Phoenix is at least, 10, 15 years, 19 years from the first movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine does not have that luxury. And it just for instance, Sabertooth is, apparently Wolverine's brother-ish, and they grew up together. Also, he's got super healing powers, which, if he had super healing powers, from the get-go, the whole plot of the first X-Men, it doesn't really make sense. He looks cooler and is played by an awesome actor. So they don't even touch on why that is. They don't conveniently wipe his memory or make his bones adamantium, even though, Stryker already had him in custody. And he probably would have been interested in some metal bones, especially if Wolverine was getting them. So why didn't they make him Weapon X? The other thing is that, Wolverine apparently, came into contact with Cyclops, but, Cyclops' eyes, they recovered, so he didn't know it was Wolverine. I mean, it's just, there's a few more instances of that, but those are the glaring ones. Alright, let's talk about point number 3. And point number 3 is just bad writing. When I talk about bad writing, I'm talking about, things just happen because the writers said they did. Good writing, the motivations of the story tells you why they're happening. You don't have any questions about it. For an origin movie, it skips hundreds of years of origin. It teases those days where they're in, wars together. It takes you to the scene where he has his bones covered in adamantium, which was the whole point of X2, is this whole backstory and how painful it was and how was his memory wiped, and they don't do that whole storyline justice. They get there in the first 20, 30 minutes of the movie, and then we're past it and we're doing other stuff. And speaking of origins stuff, the origin of Wolverine's name, oh my gosh, this might win hardest to watch moment for this episode. He's the Wolverine, okay? He's got claws, and he's got a little bit of an attitude, and he's kind of a dickhead, like a Wolverine. That's as much origin as you need. Literally, Stryker's he's kind of like a Wolverine, and then origin done. Nobody needs to know where the name Wolverine came from. We certainly don't need some fake Native American folklore to set that up. His wife sort of tells him this story about the moon and the moon's lover and how they were tricked. Turns out the moon's lover was a Wolverine. That was his name. And when they're asking him what to put on the dog tags, he's thinking about her, and he goes, Wolverine. And it's so pointless. Another example of the writers just saying, boom, look what happened, with no motivations, is this plot twist at the end where the wife is alive. And she was working with Stryker this whole time. She's a mutant, has the ability to, it's kind of like the Purple Man, where she can make you feel things and do things if she touches your skin. And, but it turns out she really does love Wolverine. I mean, it's Hugh Jackman. I wouldn't kick him out of bed for farting. But you get there and you're like, why is this happening? I made peace with her death. Her death motivates him to go crazy, to go Wolverine and take on this project of getting this metal bones. And then she's back. And it just doesn't need to happen. We all made peace with it. Yeah, Sabertooth killed her. That's the kind of thing Sabertooth would do. And they sort of set up this whole subplot of, you're not an animal, Wolverine. You're not an animal. In that scene where she shows up, he's prepared to just go ham. and she comes back. She's like, you're not an animal. I really did love you. And then he just walks out of this island compound where all these these mutants are being experimented on, and just leaves these kids who are being tortured and kidnapped, just leaves them. He says, you know what, you're right, I'm not an animal. I'm going to leave these kids. And this mutant that's right in front of my face being operated on, I'm going to leave him too. So see you later. And then he ends up coming back in because she screams, and then he does what's right and tries to save the mutants. You know, the ending where the wife, so forgettable, I don't remember her name, like touches Stryker and says, walk forever until your feet bleed, and then keep walking. They're on an island. So basically what you're saying is walk like 20 feet and then drown to death. And the way they wiped his memory, like seriously, you've got this scientist who has all this crazy technology for the time, and the way you wipe his memories by shooting him with an adamantium bullet. His whole deal is that he heals. And the whole idea that you could shoot him in the head and he forgets is just so stupid. Just another example of this, because the writers decided it. It's almost like they got to the end of the movie and they were like, oh yeah, he doesn't remember stuff. Just like a bullet in the head or two should do the trick. And you know, we didn't get time to mention it, but let's just say, you know, as a kid, Gambit was one of my favorite characters, and it's kind of like when you eat something and you get food poisoning and you don't want to eat that thing anymore. That's how Gambit is. I can't even look at him the same anymore. So rest in peace, Gambit. Alright, now it's the part of the show where we nominate the hardest to watch moment. And we're talking about a moment that, like, you're watching the movie and you're just like, oh, that's bad. That's really bad. And for this movie, I know we were going to talk about the fake Native American folklore story, but there is unfortunately a clear winner over that. And that is the scene where he kills, I think his name is Zero, Hawkeye, Deadshot, you take your pick. He's one of those guys. He's in the helicopter's crashed. This guy somehow survived it. And he's like, at first you think they're making the point where, like, Wolverine's like, no, I'm not going to kill you because I'll be like you. He does end up killing him, but how he kills them is he uses his claws to spark a fire. And then the fire follows like a little trail to the helicopter, and then the helicopter explodes, and then as he puts his cigar and his sunglasses on, he walks away from the fire, and it's just like, ugh. It's like, I think that's maybe where the cliche came from. Like, I think I saw like a Verizon commercial where they make fun of action movies, and that is the exact scene they use. Alright, so let's talk about who was right, the critics or the users. And for this movie, I'm unfortunately going to have to go with whichever the lowest number is, meaning the critics. You know, we all loved, like I talked about earlier, we all love Wolverine, we love Hugh Jackman. All you had to do was give us like a cookie cutter, safe action movie featuring the Wolverine, and we would have just eaten it up. You know, keep some of the mystery in his character, keep some of that makes him the Wolverine, but still explore some of the more interesting aspects of it. You've got a great movie. Unfortunately, what they ended up with makes us all regret even liking Wolverine to begin with, because then Hugh Jackman had to do this. Thank goodness he had faith in the character, and he did come back for some later movies, because he really makes those movies. But this was just, it was just bad. It was an affront to everyone that loved the X-Men movies, and an affront to everyone that loves Wolverine. It was an affront to everyone. To give my own final score on this one, I'm going to have to say it's 3 Deadpools out of 10. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and join the notification squad. Okay, it'll send you like a notification whenever there's a new video. It'd be great. It's like you and me thing. I hope to post another one of these videos pretty much every week. Let me know in the comments if you have any other feedback about the video. I definitely tried to implement some of your feedback from the last video. It was super helpful. Whoever said I need to lose weight, that wasn't as helpful. Thanks, Mom. If you have a suggestion for the next movie you'd like me to review, it has to be a superhero movie, or it can be originated from comics, and it has to be 50% or less on Rotten Tomatoes, I'll do it. So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you around.